This is the Coros Pace Pro and this is the Garmin Forerunner 265. Now, both of these are some of the most popular outdoor sports watches from Coros and Garmin. Now, the Forerunner 265 costs $100 more than the Pace Pro, but does being more expensive necessarily mean that it's better? Now, to find out, I've been using both of these for the last few weeks, and in this video, I'll compare the designs, the features, compare the GPS accuracies, heart rate sensor accuracies, and much more, so you can make an informed decision on whether to buy the Coros Pace Pro or the Forerunner 265. Alright, before I jump into the detailed comparisons for these two sports watches, I just wanted to mention that the Pace Pro is the newer of these watches, and it comes in three colors: black, blue, and gray, with either silicone or nylon straps, and there's just one size available for the Pace Pro. Whereas the Garmin Forerunner 265, it comes in two sizes. One's the standard Forerunner 265 and there's a 265S, which is a smaller size of this watch, and each size comes in three different colors, so there's quite a lot more variety for the Forerunner 265. Now, I've been testing out the Pace Pro in this gray color with the standard silicone straps, and the Garmin Forerunner 265 is the standard version here, not the small version, in this aqua color scheme, which I really like. And this again is the standard silicone strap that comes with the Forerunner 265. Okay, so let's compare the design and specs for both of these watches, and both of them actually felt quite light and comfortable to wear on a daily basis, but the Pace Pro is slightly chunkier when it comes to thickness, but there's not much difference in weights between these two at all. They're made primarily of polymer, which is basically plastic, but the display here on the Pace Pro is actually made of mineral glass, which is a bit inferior when you compare it to the Corning Gorilla Glass available on the 265. Now, on the Forerunner 265, the display is also ever so slightly recessed within the bezel when you compare it to the Coros Pace Pro, but regardless of that, I have not had any issues with any major scratches or bumps on either of these watches. Now, whilst we're talking about the displays, the Pace Pro boasts a new 1.3-inch bright and colorful AMOLED touchscreen. In fact, it's the first AMOLED screen on any Coros watch. So things like watch faces, menus, performance, and recovery metrics look amazing on this 1500 nits screen. And the resolution is actually pretty good with crisp colors, animations, and icons, and it has held up fairly well in dark areas as well as bright sunlight conditions. The display on the 265 is really good, vibrant, crisp, and the icons and animations look amazing in bright sunlight as well as in darker areas, so no complaints with the 265 at all. Now, I think Coros have done a really good job in upgrading the processor within the Pace Pro, especially when I compared it to the older Pace 3, which definitely had some lags and stutters when it came to navigating through its user interface. And when it comes to UI, the Pace Pro only has two buttons, one of which I've already shown is this digital dial, which in my experience has been an absolute joy to use day to day. Now, on the flip side, the Garmin has 5 buttons, 3 on one side and then 2 on the other side to help you navigate through the watch. And when it comes to UI, I really like the color, the icons, as well as the animations on the Forerunner 265. I mean, even after 2 years, just look at how the accent bar changes color and pulses through all of these glances. I really like that, and I feel that it's more cohesive and uniform when I compare it to the UI on the Coros Pace Pro, which to me just feels a bit dated and dead, so to speak, because it's just the same user interface that the Pace 3 had before this, but it's now just being displayed on an AMOLED screen. Oh, and one other difference between these two is that the digital dial on the Pace Pro also acts as an ECG sensor, which is used to facilitate the wellness check on the Pace Pro, whereas the 265 doesn't have an ECG sensor built in, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to storage, there's 32 gigabytes of internal storage on the Pace Pro, which is way more than the 8 gigabytes on the 265. But given the lack of music streaming apps and other third-party apps on Coros wearables, the usage for this space for most users will just be for downloading offline maps. Now, you can still download and transfer offline MP3 music files onto the Pace Pro, but I'm not really sure how many people are still doing that in 2025. Whereas on the 265, there are a bunch of music streaming apps and third-party apps that you can just load up the 8 gigabytes of storage with your Spotify playlists and podcasts if you wanted to. And I didn't mention offline maps for the 265 mainly because there aren't any available, which is a shame given the price of this watch. You can still download and transfer courses from the Garmin Connect app onto the 265, but they're just going to be these squiggly pink breadcrumb routes rather than full-blown offline topographical maps like you get on the Pace Pro. So that's another major difference between both of these sports watches. Now, both watches also have 5 atmospheres of water resistance, which is around 50 meters of water depth. So they're good for shallow water activities rather than deep sea diving. And finally, at the back of both of these watches, you've got the proprietary suite of sensors from Coros and Garmin. I'll be comparing their heart rate sensor accuracies later on in this video. Okay, so let's move on to the differences in health, performance, and recovery tracking. Now, being outdoor sports watches, these things are not just limited to loads of outdoor activities, but also have a few indoor training activities built in them. Now, both watches also have multi-sports like triathlon built in, and you can also create your custom multi-sport here. And when it comes to activity settings and data pages, there's loads of customization options in both watches to track several metrics on the go. If you're into running, both of these watches provide useful metrics on top of your usual heart rate and pace chart. So firstly, on the Pace Pro, you'll get pace, heart rate, running power, efficiency, elevation, cadence, stride length, and training effect, all of which is presented really nicely within the app to understand where improvements could be made. But the 265 really charges ahead when it comes to advanced running dynamics when I compare it to the Pace Pro. So on top of all of the things that I just mentioned for the Coros Pace Pro, the 265 will also show you a grade adjusted pace, performance condition, which is a real-time assessment of your ability to perform, vertical ratio and vertical oscillation, ground contact time, temperature, run walk time, speed, and even things like sweat loss. Maybe all of that information is useful to you, maybe it's not, but it's available from the Forerunner 265. And I personally like looking at all of those information and data points because there's always something that I can use to try and improve myself. Like with my vertical oscillation, which I just wouldn't know with the Pace Pro because it doesn't show me that information. The performance and recovery metrics are also largely similar on both of these watches, but they're called slightly different things. Now on the Pace Pro, for example, I've been getting a weekly suggested training load metric to maintain my training efforts, training intensity, which analyzes the intensity of my activity so I can manage my fitness levels. And there's also a recovery metric which shows how well rested I am. Now on the 265, there's the training status feature, which does exactly the same things as the training load and intensity metrics on the Pace Pro. And here it goes a bit deeper by tracking the acute and chronic loads. There's training readiness, which shows how ready I am to take on my next activity. And there's also metrics like heart rate variability, sleep tracking, stress tracking, and so on to manage your recovery on both of these watches. Now, one difference between these two is that on the 265, you get something known as a daily summary at the end of the day, which kind of gives you advice on whether you need to relax, calm down, and wind down after an intense day, which again adds to the feeling of the Garmin Forerunner 265 being a bit more active and alive, constantly analyzing your metrics and giving you live feedback, whereas you don't get anything like that on the Coros Pace Pro. Now, on most days, the sleep data coming out of both of these watches were comparable and they were just a few minutes off each other. I did sometimes feel that the Pace Pro misunderstood me lying in bed as if I was actually falling asleep. Take this example here. I was in bed watching Silo on Apple TV at around 10:30, but the Pace Pro thought that I was already asleep, whereas the Garmin Forerunner 265 was quite accurate in predicting the actual time I sleep, which was just around midnight. So the sleep data coming out of the 265 is just a bit more accurate than on the Pace Pro. Now, from an overall overall health, performance and recovery tracking perspective, I think that the 265 just edges ahead of the Pace Pro, given the wealth of data that's coming out from the Garmin and in the Garmin Connect app when I compare it against the Pace Pro and the Coros app. Okay, so let's talk about the smart functionalities on both of these watches. And on the Pace Pro, you can receive notifications from your phone, but you can't really reply to anything, nor even preset messages like you can on the Garmin Forerunner 265, which is a bit disappointing. Now, both have weather apps, music apps that you can pair with your Bluetooth headphones. There's a camera app on the Pace Pro here that you can pair with a GoPro or Insta360 camera, as well as a compass. And like I said before, on the 265, there's a bunch of music streaming apps, as well as third-party apps that can be downloaded straight to the watch, but this is lacking on the Pace Pro. On the 265, the notifications are really good. You can also see images if there are any sent straight on the watch. Oh, and just for the avoidance of doubt, both of these don't have any LTE or cellular versions, so they will always be connected to your smartphone. But one difference between them is that with the 265, you can use NFC payments via Garmin Pay. So after a long training session, you can go have a drink or a coffee and pay for it using the 265, which is just not possible with the Coros Pace Pro. Neither of these are actually full-blown smartwatches like Samsung Galaxy watches or Apple Watch Ultras, but they do have some smart features, with the 265 having a bit more smart functionality than the Pace Pro. But if you were wanting to get a sports watch with a full-blown suite of smart features, click on the pop-out banner right now to watch my full in-depth review of the Samsung Galaxy Watch Ultra, which blends the smartwatch features with the sports watch features really well. Okay, so let's compare the heart rate sensor accuracies of both of these sports watches, and I've been using Polar's H10 ECG chest strap to benchmark my heart rate readings, and this is often considered as the gold standard for heart rate measurement. And looking at one of my runs here, both watches managed to pick up the rise in my heart rate fairly quickly at the start of the run, and it's quite obvious that both of these have been in sync with the chest strap for almost throughout the run, and both of them picked up all of the intervals during this session. There were a couple of parts where both were slightly off from the chest strap, but these are minor deviations in the grand scheme of things, so I'm really happy with both of these wearables for outdoor running. Okay, so let's look at strength training at the gym, and this is where I normally see wrist-based optical heart rate sensors start to struggle because of all of the rapid movements between different exercises, and the results here in the chart are just about fine. Both the Pace Pro and the 265 are almost in sync with each other and not that far off from the chest strap, except for a couple of areas where both of these struggled. The first part of this workout was entirely legs, and you can see that the Pace Pro was spot on in picking up my heart rate. And if you want to see how the Pace Pro performs in different strength training exercises, you can click on the pop-out banner or in the link in the description below for that video. So overall, the heart rate sensor accuracies on both of these sports watches are pretty good, and if you're going to use them for outdoor running, you can't go wrong with either of these. Okay, so let's quickly look at the GPS accuracies, and both watches have dual frequency antennas here that can latch onto multiple satellite systems for location tracking when outdoors. Now, for all of my tests, I've been using the dual frequency modes on both of these watches for maximum accuracy. And for all of my runs, the distance as well as the average pace measured by both of these watches have been consistently similar, which is good news. So here's a few examples of some of my runs. Okay, so looking at the tracking accuracy for one of my runs here, both caught my location fairly quickly, and they did well tracking my location, including the correct side of the road that I actually ran on. And they stayed locked onto me even through this tree coverage, and there were quite a lot of nuanced turns during this run, and both of them seem to have picked up all of those turns even when I crossed roads at various points. Now, overall, I think that the dual band antennas on both of these watches for location tracking are pretty good. So if you're going to use this again for outdoor runs or other outdoor activities, you can't go wrong with either of these sports watches. Okay, so before I jump into the battery drain profile for these sports watches, I just wanted to show that the Coros Pace Pro actually comes with this thing. This is a USB-C charging adapter where you can stick any USB-C charging cable on one side and stick the other end to the Coros Pace Pro to charge it. And it comes with this really nice storage thing with a key ring that you can just stick to your keys for your house or for your car. So this charging adapter always stays with you wherever you go, rather than having to remember to take your proprietary charging cable, which is still the case with the 265. In addition to that difference, Coros claim that the Pace Pro can last for up to 20 days for daily use and 31 hours in dual frequency navigation mode, whilst the Forerunner 265 can do 13 days for daily use and 14 hours in dual frequency mode. Now those specs straight away tell us that the Coros Pace Pro is actually going to perform better than the Forerunner 265, but I guess the real question is, how much better? Now, I'm always a bit suspicious with manufacturer claims, as they're often measured under strict conditions. And on average, the Pace Pro actually lost just 1% battery whilst I was sleeping at night, which is amazing, by the way. And the Forerunner 265 lost around 6% battery at night on average. And for outdoor GPS workouts, the Pace Pro lost around 4.1% per hour, and the Forerunner 265 lost 6.9% per hour. Now overall, the Pace Pro lasted for exactly 14 days and the 265 lasted for 7 days on a single charge with fairly heavy usage. And considering the time I use these for outdoor workouts, the Pace Pro could last for up to 24.5 hours in dual frequency mode, whereas the 265 could last for up to 14.5 hours in dual frequency mode. Oh, I should mention that I did use the music streaming services on the Forerunner 265 whilst I was working out with my Bluetooth earbuds, so it could last a teensy bit more. Now, it's quite obvious that the Coros Pace Pro's larger battery capacity is doing its job really well, but I'm really impressed by the way Coros have optimized their battery out here with this new AMOLED touchscreen, and the fact that the 265 can last for up to a week on a single charge is not bad either. But between the two, the Coros Pace Pro is a clear winner. Okay, so let's quickly talk about the app interfaces for both of these watches. Now, the good thing about the Coros app is that it's completely free to use without any paywalls, and this is also the case with the Garmin Connect app. Now, the interface of the Coros app is really intuitive. It shows you all of the health, performance and recovery metrics measured by the Pace Pro in a bit more detail, along with your training calendar. Now, the interface of the Garmin Connect app has been updated fairly recently, and it also shows you all of your health metrics measured by the 265 in a bit more detail, along with your training calendar, any races or events, and your training plans from Garmin Coach. Now, activity data in both apps is also presented really well. Take this outdoor run, for example. Both apps show me a map of my route, quite a lot of stats and charts for metrics like I mentioned before, and Garmin will actually give you a bit more detail here in the app when it comes to advanced running dynamics. Now, there's a ton of additional features available on these apps, like the muscle heat map that you can see here, workout detection if you're strength training, rep counters, a large database of workouts if you're feeling lost and need inspiration, and you can also create your own routes for outdoor activities and transfer them to these watches. But one difference that I've found is that in the Garmin Connect app, you can ask the app to create a route once you set a distance, which saves me a fair amount of time if I wanted to try out a new route. Whereas in the Coros app, you either have to manually create your own route or import an external GPX file. Now, one slight annoyance with the Garmin Connect app is that things like watch faces and third-party apps need to be downloaded using a separate app called Garmin Connect IQ. Whereas with the Coros app, you get all of the watch faces in the same Coros app. Now, I personally quite like both the Coros and Garmin Connect apps. They're clean, intuitive, give just the right amount of information when it comes to training, performance and recovery, have a ton of additional features to help you train and recover, and are completely free, so you can't go wrong with either of these apps. So then, which one of these is a better outdoor GPS sports watch? If you wanted the cheaper option with a better battery and full-blown offline topographical maps, get the Coros Pace Pro. But if you wanted more advanced running dynamics, depth of data, smart features, NFC payments, third-party apps, music streaming, as well as a better user interface and software integration, get the Garmin Forerunner 265. Alright, so I just wanted to say thanks to all of you amazing subscribers and to new viewers. Don't be shy from pressing that subscribe button, especially if you don't want to miss out on my full in-depth comparison of these two sports watches against the Sunto Race S and the Polar Vantage M3, and my deep dive into the new Garmin Instinct 3. See you in the next one.